now it's red, and red means it's recording. So hey there, everybody. Welcome to Composer Help. My name's Alan Chappelle. I work for Four Kitchens. I generally go by the alias General Redneck, or Hey You with the overalls. Most people recognize me at the camps I go to because I happen to wear this get-up. And there's a nice little story to that. If you want to know a little bit more about the origins and whatnot of why I get up here and speak in overalls, we can talk about it after the talk. But to start off with, I wanted to introduce y'all to the new Four Kitchens. New Four Kitchens logo looks a little retro on this screen, but we just rebranded. And Four Kitchens is an agency where we do good in good company. We try to make the web a better place and to teach and learn and advocate for all. And we're driven by our content expertise and our technical excellence, and we have our partnerships that are rooted in our shared values. We live by our core values, and one of them is to do good. So doing good in good company is where we come from. Myself, my name's Alan Chappelle. I'm a PHP developer. I've been developing for 18 years now. That was hard. That was a hard number for me to look at here recently. I was like, dang. And then I've been in Drupal community for about 15 years. I'm a heavy hitter PHP developer, but I specialize in DevOps, code delivery and continuous integration. I like to build tools that make developers more efficient. So that's where I like to go. And a lot of that starts with Composer these days, believe it or not. Specifically, since I'm a PHP developer. Hey, if I was a JavaScript developer, it'd probably be NPM. But I'm not. So how many of you use Composer for your day-to-day? I figured that the answer to that has went way up since Drupal 7 days. How many of you use more than just Composer and Composer install and Composer update? Okay, got any examples? Just real quick, throw them out there. What other commands out of Composer?
Validate.
Oh, validate. That's a good one.
Composer Y.
Composer Y. We'll be talking about that today. That's for sure. Those are good. Those are good ones. And how many of y'all have ever looked at the Composer command line documentation?
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, we got a few. Yeah. Well, I'll try to give it to you in a little bit easier to consume form than just what you're going to be reading there. We'll talk about it. This is going to be a conversation. I'm not going to try to just spit words out at you, but my goal is to of this presentation is to rectify that and to do it, kind of in real time. I'm going to use some of my Composer-based knowledge to give you some tips along the way. The scope of Composer is a little bit more than just obviously this command line tool that we're going to be, what we're talking about today. Like its use case goes on into the packages space and like the ideology of your dependencies and dependency trees. Dependency management is a big idea, and how do we work with that? That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm not going to go top down per se whenever I talk about this, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. And I might skip around a little bit, and I'm going to throw in a couple of other tips and tricks that aren't specifically about the command line tool itself, but you'll be using it to be able to navigate your journey through working with dependencies and dependency management. So let's start off by typing in the namesake of this presentation, shall we? Let's type in Composer Help. Now this is one of the biggest things that people have about this. This command does not do what you think it will do. It says here, Composer Help. Let's throw in some things. The list command lists all commands. Well, I guess, if I really wanted to, why don't you just do the list command for me? Okay, well, it's a Composer list. All right, this is the actual command that we want. This one right here, this is, I'm starting to see here that this is a little small. Give me a second. Let's throw this a little bit bigger on this screen. There we go. This command lists out all the commands that we'll be talking about today. One of the things in Composer, we can actually use this command, Composer list, to spit out a whole documentation of Composer in a markdown format if we want to. If you want to read it later, but I'm not going to sit you through that. It's kind of hard to read, but believe it or not, it's something along the lines of, have y'all ever seen, I can't believe, I closed that stupid tab. There is if you've ever looked at Composer documentation, CLI, and this is why I said we'll kind of fill our way through this, because I go and do something like this. All right, have you ever looked through this site before? Yeah. If you haven't, you probably should. If we spit out the MD format, the markdown format of documentation from command line, it pretty much gives you this site. So that's their automation of way to make their own documentation, is they make their tool do the documentation for them while they're building it, in code. So that it's kind of cool. We'll be talking about that a little bit. So these are all the commands, and what I mean by we're not going to go top down. We're not going to start with about. We don't need to know what about does per se, but there are some really interesting ones in here that I don't know if you've ever went through here and just tried these, just to see what they do. Writing this presentation, I did. I was kind of enlightened by some of that, and I had to go off script from what I put in the summary for this for this talk to kind of let's go through some of this. So first things first, we did Composer help, we did Composer list. Let's talk about the first thing you probably need to know that you never knew that you needed to know, and that is this one right here, completion. Install this. Now, if you type this out, Composer completion, it spits out this. You have any guess of what that is? Of course you don't. That's all code. But if you do Composer completion help, it tells you exactly what it is. This completion command dumps the shell completion required for the shell auto completion. How many times have you typed in, Composer up DTATE or something like that, and we're like, well, crap, I gotta go retype it again or something. Instead, you can do Composer up, and then it says upgrade, update, and I still can't get tab complete after you install that. So that's the first thing you need to know. The first thing you need to do is go install that. It tells you exactly how to do it right here. In my bash RC, I used this one down here, which is eval. I threw that in my bash RC file, and ta-da! Now I have completion, and that's really nice, because then I can do something like, let me go to one of my little cheat sheets here and go Composer update Drupal core. How easy is that? So that's the first thing you need to know. It's a power play on Composer. The next thing we need to talk about is how many people has ever used Composer initiate? How many of you write modules or projects or anything on the day-to-day? And you probably only ever had to use this command once if you ever needed to, and it's really easy. Let's say you're starting a brand new project from scratch, and you want to make it where someone else can use, packages or something, come get it. The first thing you have to do is Composer init. It asks you some questions. What do you want to namespace your package as? Okay, in our case, I'm going to just go with Alan and Drupal. Okay, what do you want to make the description? Who do you want to be the author? What is your stability? What type of package is this? Anyone ever contemplated Composer package types before?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that later too. So, by default, everything's a library, FYI. Spoiler. And then, what's your license? This is pretty important, but their default's kind of lacking, as in nothing. But I've had that one come back and bite me a few times. And your dependencies, you can search for them here if you want to. I usually go say no here and no here because I want to define them in a big old list typically. And do you have any scripts that are automatically, like, do you need to do any mapping in PSR4? Anybody else know what PSR0, PSR4 stands for? Okay, PSR is PHP, I can't try to remember. It means it's a regulation. It's a standards regulation. And in case of PSR0 and PSR4, they're namespacing regulations. So how do we map a class name to a directory mapping? And that's what those two stand for. There's other PSRs like PSR7, which have to do with totally different ideas than just class names mapping and stuff. But these are the two that have to do with that. And you'll see that question a lot, especially whenever you're working with PHP. It's like, which one are you using? Which standardization are you using? Are you using PSR0, PSR4? And how are you naming your classes versus your namespace versus your directory setting? And by default, we almost always use PSR4, which is we put something in the source folder, and then as the namespace grows, we add on a new folder. So your namespace / plugin goes to source plugin, so on and so forth. That's a quick overview. I digress. That's probably for another talk. We'll say yes. Okay, so what did that do? If I was to look in here, that would actually create this file, this as my composer.json file. So that's my start. That's where I start. That's the start of your Composer project. It might be, except for sometimes we want to do something from a template. Okay, y'all probably done this with Drupal before. Let's talk about Composer Create Project for just a second. Composer Create Project, you've seen in the documentation as something like, let's see, something about like this. Composer Create Project, Drupal / recommended - project Drupal. Okay, this says, let me create a whole project based off of this package. So if we were to go to packages and search for it, we would actually find one called Drupal recommended project out there. Let's not download that into the vendor folder. Let's actually copy it and put it in your folder. And let's put it in the Drupal folder. Okay, that's what that stands for. So if I was to go look up this package, which that's actually a really good one. How do you find out where that package lives? Drupal / recommended project. What is your normal workflow for finding out where to find that on the internet? Packages? You go into your, do you go Google? Yeah, do you go Google?
Drupal / recommended project.
How about we do this? Composer browse. Oops. Control C. That's exactly what I meant it to do. Yeah, it's Composer browse Drupal recommended project. It says, so for Composer to work, I must. These are a couple of things. Give me a second. Composer browse takes you straight to the project. If you say Composer browse -- home page, it'll take you to what's listed as the home page for that project. So in the case, this is really helpful for like Drupal modules, because if you say Drupal / let's say better exposed filters, okay. If you say composer browse, let's do that. Composer browse, Drupal / better exposed filters. I think is how it's going, something like that. Not found. Is it BEF? Do y'all remember? Yeah, I think it's BEF. If you know what it is, then you can go for it. Let me see. I'm going to go and cheat, and let's look in a extreme installers example real quick. I'm going to look at all of my dependencies really quick. So I'm going to go to composer.json. I'm going to look in here. Oh, I've got a lot of them. Hey, cores is a good one. Everyone needs to look up documentation for cores. So let's say composer browse Drupal / cores. Hey, look, it took me straight to there. It did -- homepage. It actually take me to this one here, to this same link. So just an FYI, you need a little bit of like that really quick. You need to add a little bit of efficiency to your life because you want to go to the Drupal project really quick. This is the way to do it if you know it. I always end up finding myself going up here and typing out drupal.org/project and typing in a machine name anyway. So, this is just a little bit quicker that way. Tips and tricks. So the little obscure things you never knew about Composer. Let's talk about Composer Create Project real quick. So I'm going to go up here, give me a second. Let me remove my Drupal folder real quick. I'm going to do the create project. Okay, put in Drupal. Y'all probably done this to start off a new Drupal site. That's pretty simple. There's a couple of things that you can do in there. So if we do a composer create project help, you can see that there's a couple of things that are in here. Particularly, particularly you can ignore platform requirements or something of that nature. We'll actually talk about that here in a little bit. But this is pretty straightforward. This is something you'll always use. So to see what that did, let's go into Drupal and let's look. You'll see that there's actually already a vendor folder, a web folder, composer.json with the lock. So if I was to look at the composer.json, it's something like this. First thing I would say you need to do anytime you do this, make sure to go change that name so that way you don't get confused. So like if I was working at 4 Kitchens, I would do a change this to something like 4 Kitchens. My test project. And what this does is that whenever you start debugging things, this makes it very clear that it's not Drupal's fault that it's broken. Okay, it's that's a thing. So let's talk about install real quick. What's a good module out there? How about a little bit of shameless self-promotion here? Let's say I want to do a project I want to add to my project Composer require. I need to do a Composer install first. Composer install. Let me do require first. Require Drupal. Internet's a little slow here. Use natural sort. This is one of mine. So I could not find a stability. Oh, okay. So this would be a good reason to maybe to go. First thing you need to do is probably change. You need to tell it what version you want. So in my case, I'm going to want to say 2.star at or 2 at dev. or something of that nature. But now it says it's giving me a couple of other issues. Now this is the reason why you don't do technical demos on the fly, because now I have to walk through and debug all this stuff for you. Here's actually this is a challenge here, because I was testing out my stuff earlier, and can any of y'all tell me right off the top of your head what's wrong here? Or does this just look like garbly goop to everybody? The older PHP. Yeah, I was testing some things with PHP version earlier, and you could actually probably do a platform rec equals PHP here to ignore platform rec PHP here and probably get it. Now it says that it can't do that. Let's just do let's take its recommendation. So it's actually telling me here that version does not exist. But here's a good alias for it. Okay, so I've installed that version on the wrong version of PHP. Don't do this at home, please. This happens sometimes. Let's say you're working with Lando, and the Lando version is on 8.1, but your local machine's on 7.4 for some reason. And you're too lazy to run Lando Composer and do the thing again. You can do this instead. This also helps out whenever you're doing a live, like PHP version swap on a server. Anyone ever done that before? Yes. Okay, yeah. I figured I'm not the only one that does things like that every once in a while. You might need the code on that server before you actually do the PHP swap. That can happen. So PHP using PHP rec, or you can this command, the way I used it, ignore platform rec PHP, just ignores that one. Just the PHP version. You can also do it with extensions, certain extensions. But there's also, if you want to do just everything, you can take off that PHP specifically and just add an S to the end of that flag, and now it's everything. It doesn't matter what your system looks like; it's going to install that thing. That's sometimes that brute force, methodology is something you need. This works with require, install, and update, all of those commands. So I've required that one. First, I'm going to do the right thing. Let me switch my PHP real quick. I am going to switch it to 8.1, so that I'm actually there. All right. Now I should be here. Let's see how are we doing.
What did you use for switch PHP there?
I have an alias for update alternatives on Linux because I'm using Ubuntu, and so the alias I created is switch PHP, but it actually runs the whole command sudo update alternatives configure to PHP. Yes, sir. Okay.
Does ignoring of platform requirements, does that have any effect on Composer lock, or is that just the Composer dependencies themselves without reference to the platform?
Okay, the question is does ignoring the platform recs have any change on Composer lock? It does not. It'll use the version that is. If you're just doing an install, it doesn't change the lock at all. If you're doing a require, it uses the latest version that is available. So it's smart enough to know that if everybody else is looking for 8.1, I'm going to use 8.1 as well, because that's the lowest version in the lock file so far. You can also force it. And there's a configuration for that, and I'm sure that y'all have used that before, and we can probably go through that here in a little bit too. But that in my case, it would have when I did the require, it would have used 8.1 as the lowest. Okay, So we've went into a little bit on the require, install, and reinstall. How many of y'all work on contrib modules or patch them or whatnot?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured most of the people in this room would. How do you go about how do you go about doing that development workflow? Like, what's that look like to you?
I can speak to that. I always
Yeah.
use that composer install prefer source flag to get the source
Cool. Yeah.
code. Yeah.
So he's on my same page. Anyone else understand what he just said? Okay, let me break it down for you for a second. Composer is grabbing code from GitHub, GitLab, wherever in the world. Most of the time, it goes and it grabs the distribution of it. Does everyone know what that word means? It's the zip file that contains all the code. And that's because it's easy to store and you don't have to worry about Git folders and history and all that stuff mucking up the water. But when we're making a patch, we have to have, or we like to have, Git. Because then we have the version history. We have the last known state of the project. So how do you normally do that? Well, some people, they delete the folder, go do the git clone command and get it down into the config and into the contrib folder, and then they start doing their work. That's a little bit of a process. It takes let's streamline that a little bit. Composer already knows how to get all of that for you from Git. So let's use it. There's actually, so you use Composer install. I learned a little bit about a command in Composer while I was working on this. I learned something new. I've been doing it the hard way this whole time. I go in there, delete the folder, Composer install, prefer source. Okay, it works.
Yeah.
But instead of going in there and deleting the folder now, we can actually do Composer reinstall Drupal use natural sort prefer source. Prefer source means I'm going to go check it out. What it does there, deletes the folder and does git checkout for you. So now I can go here, cd, let's see, it's in web, modules, contrib, use natural sort. So you see it's on that last one. And then from here you can copy and paste your commands from the git issue queue like normal. Okay? So if I was to git remote-v and look at my remotes, these are the remotes that are here. You might have to change these to be the SSH version so that you can push up if you don't have like tokens configured and stuff. But that's easy enough. I can do a git remote or let's say set URL and it'd be origin and then change it to whatever I copy and paste from D.O. And then I'm golden. Then I can do then I do my own thing. So I git checkout -b patch branch, do my things, make my changes, do my git diff, and then push it up. Or if you're in the business of merge requests, push that up. We still got 2 workflows. We got it happens. It happens. But either way, you still use Git. But this makes it really easy. Composer reinstall, prefer source. That's the way to go. Notice also really quick. I want to disclaimer this. I'm working with Composer 2 exclusively here. I know that some people may still be on Composer 1. It happens, but it's most of these tricks will work with Composer 1 as well. There's a little bit difference in behavior in the way that works, though. Specifically, if you're checking out like a dev version of something, checks out the source automatically for you instead of getting the zip file first. That's the big difference. And so you wouldn't even have to do the reinstall. You just go in there and start hacking away, right? You know, but that's back a little bit. Y'all feel smarter yet, or are you confused? Okay, cool.
Just not in my head.
Yeah. We gotta have those too. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is Composer Update. There's a couple of tricks here that I want to talk about in Composer Update. We do Composer Update help.
You're
Really?
in the branch.
Okay, thank
or
you.
the module.
Thank you, thank you. I should just did a dash. Okay. CD dash FYI, really handy. Switch between two directories really fast. Like if you remember, if you went from one to another and you want to go back, CD dash will take you back to your directory that you were before. That's a efficiency in the command line thing. So in this case, I want to do the same thing I did before. Let's go up a couple of those are help. Let's look. So update's got a few tags on it, or a few flags on it that are really handy that y'all may or may not know about. We talked about prefer source. Prefer install is like you took prefer source and prefer dist and you abstract them out to be able to have more than just those two options. You can do either one or do both. With prefer install, if you look, there's actually dist, source, and auto. And if you read this a little bit, auto chooses source for dev versions, dist for the rest. This takes you back to the Composer 1 functionality. If you're interested in going back that direction, that's just it's kind of a handy thing. Dry run's really nice. I don't know how many actually do dry run. Normally I just sit there and do the update and let it error out because it's still going to revert it anyway. But dry run's nice for you to for your rest assured in case it does exception out. In some case it doesn't actually download a whole bunch and you have a half upgraded code base. That would be that could end bad, but when does that happen? And then the no dev would probably be one of the flags that I'd like to flag to you. And that is disables the installation of required dev packages. When do you use that? Can anyone answer? Yes.
Maybe when you're deploying to live?
When we're deploying to live is the answer for that one. You will want to use no dev as a flag when you're deploying to live. What you don't want on there, PHP unit is one of them. Known for being able to execute any code whenever someone calls it from a remote code bug or whatnot. It can execute. It can cause some trouble, especially if you don't follow best practices of keeping your vendor folder outside of the web root. So that's a best practice I recommend too. You notice Drupal recommended actually does that too. It puts everything. Pantheon uses this. Aqua uses this pattern. They take everything, all your libraries and stuff, they stick it outside of the web, and everything that's public goes inside the web folder or the doc root folder, or some people call it the build folder. So make sure that's just a couple of things. Then the other one I'd like to point out here, whenever you do that, is the optimized autoloader. That one goes hand in hand with no dev when you're pushing to live. I can show you what optimized autoloader does for you. It's pretty simple. It's let me see what's the best way to do this. Add this. Okay, so I'm going to add all of this, I know it's telling me about submodule. We'll worry about that later. Okay. So I added everything to, so if I do a get status real quick, I'm not using the .getignore folder. Let's pretend this is something that's going up to production, because, like on Pantheon or Acquia, when you're building out that artifact, we call it artifact build, which has everything downloaded. You have to commit it to that Git repository. So let's pretend that's this. Now, if I did it just standard, without any of those no devs or anything. So if I do a composer install no dev and optimize autoloader. Now I do a git diff. Notice that there's a whole bunch more in there. Now that's not usually your thought of optimizing by putting a whole bunch more in there, but this is actually a one-to-one mapping of every class to every file, instead of it having to programmatically go and find every single class using a lookup method. So that makes it more optimized, because you're taking less cycles to go and find things. So looking through a dictionary, a hash, an array is so much faster than doing an AKA for loop on a file system. So that's what that does. I highly recommend you do that, push into production. Some of the problems this causes, some of the things this solves, depending on which way you look at it, is if you have multiple things that have the same class, same exact class name, the hat's really bad about this, FYI. There's like 2 different repositories have the exact same namespace. The first one wins. When you do not optimize your autoloader, it can switch back and forth. And that happens when you have like Pantheon. Let's take Pantheon or Acquia, for example. They have multiple heads for your web, for coming in and hitting your code, right? So that means you have multiple instances of your file system. Well, how do we know which one's first? We don't, because it could have been stored on, this sector in the hard drive on one of them, and this sector on the hard drive in the other one. So you pick up one and then the other, and that causes for some bugs that are really, really hard to track down. Whereas this one, it would be repeatable, because you could see exactly which class it goes to. Sorry about the really deep dive into that, but that's that's a little bit more information for you to know. Like this is why we do our installs on production the way we do. Yes.
Does dump autoload regenerate this?
Dump autoload regenerates your autoload files. Yes, that happens. You will want that to happen when, let's say, an exception happens in the middle of your install. Sometimes you get a really weird bug and you just can't figure out because it can't find the class. And sometimes that's a good reason to just. It's kind of like, what's the first thing you do whenever Drupal's having trouble? You clear the cache. So yes, sir.
Is this something that you would commit to your project repository?
This is something you. Is this something you would commit to your project repository? Not the source build. Okay, if that makes sense. There's a source build, there's an artifact build. Source build is the one that your developers are working on day to day. That's the one that you're doing your code reviews on. That's the one that, and you do not commit anything. Best practice, you do not commit anything in the vendor folder. Okay, anything that you can download as a dependency, you do not commit as a commit into that build. What you do commit is the composer lock file. So if I was to look at my structure here, I have this composer lock file. It has the exact mapping of every single version of every single dependency within the project that the last person updated to. This is vital for repetitivity, which means so that each of your developers are on the exact same version of the exact same libraries every time they build. If you get rid of your lock file, it's always the latest. And that could cause trouble whenever programmer A is doing a feature, then programmer B is doing a feature, and they're like, well, this thing's broken. And they're like, well, but it's working on my machine, but it's not on my machine. Why? You can't check, you can't find out really easily, because unless you sit there and go line by line and check the versions of the libraries. This enables consistency. That's also why NPM started, back in the day you had shrink wrap. I don't know if y'all remember that. And then they started actually having to package lock file because of this exact issue. Yes, sir.
Couldn't you lock it in composer.json without the carrots? Like semantic?
Yes. So he says, can't you lock the version in the composer.json without the carrots? And so just to kind of illustrate what's going on there, let's look at the composer.json here. Composer, I can type. Let's see. Okay, so this is one that was built with the Drupal project. Let me see, where am I at real quick. I was afraid that we might not be able to get through everything on this, and that looks like it's going to be the case here. Okay, let's get down to the required section. So here on the required section, we have the carrots. That's a special symbol there that says, get this version as the lowest, or anything above it within the same major version. Not to be confused with this one. I know I'm going off script of what your question right quick. The tilde, which is magical. It's like a unicorn. Which says the tilde without the caret. Let me. Everybody's watching. My typos escalate like crazy. The tilde here says, get anything that's between this. It's special depending on whether you're on a subversion or not, and how many versions you put here and your version numbers you put in here. But it basically, in this case, I would not get anything in this case that is above 10.0. So if I had a 10.0.99 come out, I would get that, but I would not get 10.1. Does that make sense? This is really handy for if you're still stuck on 9.4 and you do not want to go up to 9.5 because you're so afraid that it's going to blow up your site. That's when you use that. Okay, you'll stay on 9.4 and then you can control 9.5. If you use the caret, then you're going from 9.4 up to 9.5.7, and then your client's like, what the hey? That happens. So in this case, I highly recommend actually using the caret, using the tilde in this particular case, for doing your Drupal core versions. But to your point, why can't we just do this? Because in this case, then I have to manually go in here and control every single version, manually. So if I wanted to upgrade all these core versions, it's a little bit of a chore. Because first I need to go look and see what the newest version is. Then I have to go in here and say, oh, that one's 1, that one's 1, and that one's 1. Oh, okay. I'm done. Okay. I'm not going. No. So that's why you can, but it's not best practice to. So in this case, I'm deciding that this is the lowest version, but I want to be able to update it. So I'm going to use 10.0.0 with a tilde in it. And then what I can do here is do a composer update. You've probably seen this one, and here this is one of the tricks: Drupal core and Drupal core star. Okay, I'm going to throw in a little flag here too, -W. There's a long version of that one, but I value my typing.
You spelled composer wrong.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah. I really need to put in some aliases on here. So with that said, I'm not old version right now, so that this doesn't help out. This doesn't show what I'm trying to show you right this minute. But one of the things I wanted to point out here is I put this in quotes. Star means what it means pretty much anywhere it's wildcard. But it also means wildcard on the Linux command line. So if you use star on the Linux command line raw, it's referring to folders. So you might accidentally, if you have the right folder name, go update some packages you didn't want to update. But in this case, I want to update every package that that starts with star. That could also mean I want to update everything that starts with, that's in the vendor Drupal. This would update all my modules if I was to do this. So Drupal/star would update all my Drupal modules. That's a good one to use, especially whenever you're like CK editor, for example. If you have CK editor and a whole bunch of plugins, you might do CK editor/star, or something of that nature. If you know that there's a vendor that where you don't want to have to type out the packages one by one, this could be a strategy. The -W, I'm sure y'all all know about, and probably it's little brother little w. Can y'all tell me what the difference between big W and little w? I'm not talking about George Bush, so. Okay, big W means everything, including the things that you in your package defined. So let's see, vim composer.json. If I was to have something like views natural sort, and views natural sort was a dependency of one of these others I was updating, and I use a big W, it would also update. If you use little w, then it would say, hey, you've got to have this version in your project. I don't feel comfortable touching that right now. Let's just update all the things that you didn't explicitly list out here, and we'll leave that one alone. That's what the little w means. So big W is, you usually use little w whenever you're doing modules and themes, and big W when you're doing core updates. That's the cheat sheet version of things. Okay, the other thing I wanted to put out here is update has a special power. It doesn't have to go to the latest version, and you don't have to require something to be a special version to not be at the latest version. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to go back to Drupal core 10.0.0. How would you normally do that?
Composer re-require it.
Yeah, Composer required 10.0.0, and that'd be a fixed version. We're back to that. But what if I want to test it out, just see if it works real quick. Without having to go do all that. Let's do a Composer update Drupal core 10.0.0. Okay, it's locked. Let me see. I have other things that are up that are also in there. I wonder if I've never tried this. Let's see if this works real quick. I've done this with modules before, but I haven't tried it with core. Oh, nothing to install. Okay, that didn't work. Let's do views natural sort real quick. Let's do a different command real quick. Any of y'all ever heard of show? Composer show?
Yeah.
It's pretty handy. Let's say Composer show Drupal /views natural sort. Okay, this is showing me the version I have installed, FYI. This gives me all the information about it, including its dependencies. Okay, So if you want to see what the dependencies of a particular package is, this is the way to go. Gives you some good information, like homepage. Remember I told you about browse? It'll take you there. And if you just do, or here. So that's the version I have. But what if I want to find out about all the versions? Well, I can do this, -- all. And what it should do is show me all the versions that's available. Okay? So now what I can do is I want to test out an earlier version. Let's do Alpha 6 or Alpha 5, for example. Let's do that. So now I can do my update, Composer, update, Drupal, views, natural sort, :5. Come on. Okay, so let me do this in a form that is that's acceptable. I'm doing this on the fly again, and this is one of the places where I messed up. So if this was a normal version number, I can choose a version that still meets the constraints, but is not the latest one. Does that make sense? So for instance, if I was to have, what's another good module? Just real quick, let's do a Composer require Drupal. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. And look at all the other stuff it downloads with it. Okay, so let's so we downloaded that. So let's say I wanted, let's see what's available for Composer, show, Drupal, Path Auto, all. We have all these versions right here. Okay, I wanted to test out what 1.9.0 was like. So I do Composer, update, Drupal, Path Auto, 1.9.0. Oh, you check this out. We have that constraint there. So what if I did a require to this real quick? So I'm going to set the requirements to just 1.0.0 because this is an old site. This is an old site. But notice that it didn't update anything because that still meets the requirements, the 1.11. Now I can actually go back to the older version. Oh, come on. What's wrong with you?
Dependencies.
We'll get there. You know what?
If you're on Drupal 10, it's saying you have to have Drupal 9 for it. There's a lot of that going on right now.
And this is why Composer frustrates the hell out of most of the people in here. This right here. And if I was on Drupal 9, we wouldn't have a.
You look at core first to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
They're
definitely
always getting
hard to
tripped
find-
up now.
It's
Yeah.
definitely hard to understand what exactly all that stuff means.
Yes.
It take a little while to read through.
Yeah, this is what we're learning right now is how do you read the problem text, especially whenever it's like 25 lines long.
That's
Actually,
hard.
so let's use this real quick. Why is this not working for me? It's like, okay, well, I've tried this a couple of times. So let's say, how many of you know about Composer Y and Composer Y not? Okay, let's do that. Composer Y, Drupal, Path Auto, or let's say why not in this case. Path Auto, and let's type in the version 1.0.9.
Path off.
Yep, that's it. That's the one.
Typing cards.
So what did I type wrong this time?
1.9.0 should be.
Yeah, okay. Again, this is now I've made so many mistakes, I'm like sitting up here shaking in my boots. So it's like, all right, here we go. So this is the reason, this one gives you a little bit more info. It says Drupal core, so my project does not require Drupal core, but 10. let me see. So it's requiring Drupal core 8 or 9. Okay, that's what it says. But we're requiring 10.0.8 in our case, or that one's installed. And so this is a way for you to kind of, you can systematically start looking through this, and this will give you a little bit more information about things. Another really interesting one, and I've got about 4 minutes left. Let me see, where is that? This one's really interesting. Let's look at the tree. I don't know how many of y'all have ever looked at a dependency tree before. Well, this is I can look at the dependency tree of this particular one as it pertains to my project. So in this one, I'm requiring 1.11.0, and that one and this one I'm trying to require 1.9.0. This is the why not, and this is what it's not working for. Why actually is a little bit more. If you use tree with why instead of why not, it's a little bit more intuitive. You can also
do token.
Yeah.
Since that has a.
You can also, instead of using why not, we can use show. Okay, and let's use token with tree. Here's the dependency tree for token. This is all the things you have to install to have Drupal token installed in your project. It does have some redundancy here because Drupal core is huge. One requires this, which requires this, which requires that's your PHP version, but then then you have this, which requires that PHP version, so on and so forth. But this is a really easy way to easier way to find out like where in the dependencies tree has something gone wrong, and that why and why not dumbs it down for you a little bit more whenever you're looking at the tree. But if you want to look at the full tree, use show, and you can see like, okay, Drupal actually requires a lot of stuff. Yeah, I'm not tackling that today. This is going to be an 8-hour project. That's kind of like. But then you can take the information you were getting in that problem statement and start to kind of distill it into something here. This is what Composer is going through to find out what packages you need to be able to put on here. And this is just one instance, one like permutation of all the possible permutations of how packages could go together. And we all wonder why Composer's slow. I mean, you try to consume this. That's a thing. All right. I'm not going to get to installs into installers today. I hope y'all aren't sad about that one. There's a lot to dive into there. Let me leave you with a couple of other ones that you might want to use. Composer audit. Let's go to this guy. Just to give you a quick thing, look at this one. This is this Composer file. It's one of my clients. This is a Drupal 7 site, FYI. But all the patches, so it keeps on going, all the custom packages. How many of y'all use custom packages? Yeah. No, a really cool with installers, just a really cool one really quick. You can actually take and install things by vendor. For instance, we have CK Editor and CK Editor plugins. I created packages with the vendor named CK Editor plugin. That means I can install all the CK Editor plugins into the same directory. Okay? And that's because we have a whole bunch of custom ones we're going down and downloading, right? So not just the ones that came with. So in this case, we went and hit the download, and we downloaded we called it a Drupal library. Again, I was told you I'd talk about types a little bit. I'm not going to get to that today, but there's only a certain number of defined types in the Composer Installers package. You can go look that up on Composer Installer's GitHub page. It's really long, and but it doesn't contain everything, particularly two big ones we use all the time: npm asset and Bower asset from the respective packages. That's where Oomphinc comes in, and you can use that as a custom installer. But I digress into that. In this case, Drupal libraries already used. I can go up there and define something though for Drupal library. Let me get up there to the top. Okay. And this one right here says, these are the rules for installers really quick. And there's one here that says, if we have the vendor of CK Editor plugin, that means everything before the slash is CK Editor plugin, and you put it in that folder. That's a trick you might want to use one day. So that's an installer. Composer audit, really quick. These are all the security updates that are outstanding for this particular package. You can go in here, use Composer Y. Why am I not using it, or why not for those particular versions? So Composer Y not Harvest chosen, and then version 1.8.7. It thinks about it for a second, and it says that's because you idiot, are just requiring 1.1.0 upgrade now. That's all that means. Okay, it might get it, and it tells you how right here. Another one, Composer outdated. This is really good one for making reports. Red is not bad. Yellow is worse. I know. Red means that you theoretically can hit that version easily. Okay, so you should. And yellow is that's a major upgrade. Don't do it willy-nilly. So that's what those mean, and they actually shows you. It'll tell you that in the instructions up at the top. And then one last one really quick. Let me see. Oh, here's two really quick. Composer EXEC, execute. How many times have you not known where the hell the damn bin folder was? Because someone decided to configure it somewhere else. Well, now you always know. Composer execute drush. Hey, he goes runs drush. Doesn't matter where it is. It just executed it. That's one way to do it. And then the composer run function. Again, if I can type. Run scripts. And these are all the scripts that are defined within this particular composer.json. Have y'all probably defined scripts before. This is how you run them from command line. Sorry about the plethora of knowledge and the brain exploding bits that we went through here. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope you can come away with at least something you can Google. If not, this will be recorded. Come back and look at it and make fun of how many times I misspelled composer. But thank y'all for coming.